what's going on, everybody? This is Gabriel, co-founder of Over the Top, and we are continuing a series that we're calling master classes, workshops that we're going to go put on for our OTT members to build out value. Make sure you're getting to the bag so that way we can celebrate with some comfort in the bank account. So today we are met with Erik Fortin here, currently working at Overflow as a director of program management. He has a very decorated LinkedIn career in the tech space, from Facebook to Dropbox to Uber to just pick a company. He's probably been there. And so today he's going to be talking to you about how to get the best value out of your performance review, making sure you're getting set up for a promotion, raise, or just to flex on everybody at your company in a good way, like in a humble way. That's what we really want. So glad to have you, Erik. Thanks so much for having just being a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabe and Kyle. Love the OTT community and everything I've had the opportunity to witness and see you all doing. So super excited to be a part of this. And just excited to be here with your community today.
Amazing. Yeah. So let's just jump right into it. All right. Everybody wants to know, hey, performance review season is coming up. There's a lot of hot questions that we got that were being asked from Instagram, from people just messaging us about how to just get through these tough conversations, especially during this market and the times that we're in right now. So what you're going to introduce us to is just the importance of a performance review, and then 3 tips that you believe we need to follow in order to get almost a guarantee, let's call it. Yeah. That's what the social media is going to take that and run with it. You know, we need a clickbaity title. Yeah. So yeah, just 3 tips that you think will help us succeed in promotion season during performance reviews.
Yeah, awesome. So again, super excited to be here. I think one thing to note is, what you're going to hear today is just the opinion that I've gathered during my experience that I've had in my career. Just for background, Gabe mentioned a lot of it, but I've had the privilege and opportunity of working at some companies as they went through growth: Facebook, Square, Dropbox, Uber, Visco, a couple others. And, the one thing to know is a lot of companies do it differently, right? Mm-hmm. Companies do it differently. Yeah. So I think with that in mind, the first thing to really note is knowledge is really power when it comes to this, right? Now, I know that that's like a very cliche statement, but let me go and explain what I mean there. When it comes to reviews, a couple of the things that I've seen be the most critical and important is, first off, knowing, okay, what is the how, right? So when I say what's the how, that specifically means, okay, how have you done what you've done that you really want to share? And typically where you want to be pulling that from is the mission and values for your company. Typically, every good company should at the very least have a mission statement, but then also certain values that kind of lead up to that. The values would typically be kind of, hey, how do we do what it is that we do? Yeah. So if you have a commanding knowledge of those values, that's really going to help you, because it's not just the what of what you're trying to show that you've done. Yes, that's important, but it's also how you've done what you've done. Mm-hmm. So that's the how. If that's the how, the what is going to be the goals, right? Now, I always tell people, okay, do you know what the goals are for your team? Okay, good. Do you know what the goals are for your company? Okay, good. Do you know what your own individual goals are? And do those really connect, right? And I think if you don't have a good knowledge, a commanding knowledge of that, you're really going to want to make sure that you do talk with your manager to get a fuller understanding of that. Yeah. In my opinion, and in the experience that I've had, typically the goals that I've just seen be the most effective are the ones where you have a clear line of sight from your own individual goals built between you and your manager, all the way to the team level, to the division level, if you have it, depending on how many layers. There's some companies that are flat, some that are stacked. If you have a good line of sight from your goals and how they connect to the company, that's going to really benefit you. So again, let's go and just recap on that. Number 1, it's the how is going to be your mission and values. The what is going to be your goals. Yeah. I don't just want to say, hey, I achieved this goal. I want to say, hey, I achieved this goal. If you have a value of take others with you, be a team player. It's hey, I achieved this goal, but I also did so in a manner where I got to bring others with me, got to see them get the benefit of expanding the scope of their role as well. If you're maybe managing people, that's another great place to say, hey, I worked with the team and through the team to be able to do this, not just myself, right? Yeah. I think that's a key thing. So that's point number 1. Yeah,
just a quick question off of that, because I feel like, especially if you're early in your career, you're going to just be what are the mission and the goals of my company? That's probably the first place to start. Oh, yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first started, I didn't really care for that stuff. I said okay, cool, cookie cutter, this is what you put on the wall at your house of live, laugh, love. That's kind of what I interpreted it as. Guilty. But you're saying it's actually important to look at that and make sure you live by that at work at least.
Absolutely. Because again, I think you could come in there and say okay, I blew my numbers out of the water. And, you know, for some teams, like if you're on a sales team or if you're on a growth team, you know, that might be of value. But they're also going to want to say, like, hey, you know, like, did they do so in a manner that was in line with the traditions, right?
Yeah.
I always put it like this way, right? If you are able to achieve your goals, but you literally like step on people on the way up, or people look at you and say like, hey, I don't want to work with that guy, then I think you pretty much didn't really achieve anything, right? You may have hit the goal, but you did so in a way where you just kind of maybe even drove people away from you, right?
Gotcha.
So I think that that's kind of the one example that I always tout, right? It's like, you know, I would much rather have somebody as a manager who did a good job of hitting their goals, but like, hey, you know what? They were a person I enjoyed sitting next to for those 12, 13-hour, 14-hour days, versus somebody who blew it out of the water that I literally can't see myself working with in the future. And I think, again, just really making sure you know what those values are really going to help you to share with your manager and ultimately their manager for, and, you know, getting all the way to the top for, you know, your performance. So I think I've seen that be really effective.
Okay, so writing down the mission, the why of the company, and then the goals of the company or your team to get really specific.
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Let's go into 2. I like it.
Number 2. So all roads lead to impact is my number 2. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I think that let's go ahead and just take it to an example hopefully a lot of people know about, which is writing your resume, right? Now, when you're writing a resume, I think that the trap that a lot of people fall into is they fall into the trap of, okay, I'm just going to write a job description.
Yeah.
Like, these are the things that I did. I think the better resumes are the ones that show the impact of what you did.
Okay.
I call it the so what factor. So it's like, hey, you know what? I did this resulting in X% increase of XYZ.
Gotcha.
Participated in X, which grew the team by YZ. Built a system which helped achieve goals for company, right? So it's like essentially saying the so what and quantifiable. Now, how does that connect to this? When you do your performance reviews, if I'm a manager, I'm going to want to see a lot more than just like did this. Specifically, what I'm going to want to see is like, okay, now your reviews are typically going to ask 1 of 2 things, maybe sometimes a different way, but I typically think they're asking 1, what was your accomplishment, or what were your couple accomplishments you want to highlight? 2, it's going to be something like, okay, like, you know, talk about some strengths that you exhibited during this time.
Gotcha.
Right? Now, if I were to just say like the accomplishments, that's not going to be as effective as me saying, okay, this was an accomplishment that I had. This is ultimately what the impact of that accomplishment was.
Gotcha.
And then if you have something where it's like identify a strength, it's like this is the strength, here was the embodiment of that strength, and then this was the impact of the overall embodiment of that strength.
Gotcha.
So let me go ahead and just do it practically, right? Let's say for me, I'm managing an operations team. Right, and I say, okay, my goal is to make sure that we hit, 95% CSAT, right? So if I hit CSAT, customer satisfaction, it's something that we look at. If I just said, okay, yeah, I achieved 95% CSAT, or like, hey, we did something good. It's like, no, I want to say, okay, I was able to work with my team to hit 95% CSAT. The ultimate impact was we were able to achieve this goal, but also provide a great experience for our users, right? If I have a strength and it's something like, hey, like, you know, I was a great team player this year. Okay, cool. Like, you're a great team player. So what? We got 9. I was a great team player because I was able to work with my team, train them, coach them, advise where necessary, but, you know, ultimately was able to work through them to achieve that 95% CSAT, benefiting the business and growing the career, right? So you see, it's 2 very different statements there. So I think it's just really focusing. If I have to bring it back, I would say 1, if they're asking for an accomplishment, know what your accomplishment is and how it pertains to the goals. Again, really making sure we focus on goals and values, and then say, okay, you know, if they ask for your strength, show a specific embodiment of that strength, show multiple embodiments of that strength, and then show the impact, especially as it pertains to goals or just like, you know, something that you thought was really on the company. So at the end of the day, all roads lead to impact, and you're going to hear a lot about that as well.
Interesting. It's basically like what I'm hearing is take yourself out of it, but you still have to brag about yourself. But make sure when you brag about yourself, you got to connect it to the bottom line for the business. Like going back to goals, the why, the how. Like if what you did not attribute to one of those goals and number 1, then like there's no point of even like attributing your accomplishment at all. Is almost what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is there are going to be things that don't necessarily connect to your goals, but that really had an impact on the business. And I think that's fine, right? If it's like, hey, I coached, 25 people at the company, hosted a SQL class, and, you know, as a result, you know, we're now more proficient in being able to answer questions with data, right?
Gotcha.
So I think that's another thing you could do, right? But if you saw in that statement, there was still impact there. It wasn't just I coached 25 people in SQL. And yes, managers can deduce from that, like, oh yeah, like I've noticed the impact.
Right.
But you really want to put it all out there because especially, and this is another thing that I'll bring up, but especially if you're at a larger company,
Yeah.
you do really have to put in the work to potentially, show yourself like, kind of like, hey, this is what I did and this is how maybe I exceeded above my peers, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just something to note there.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about like the Facebooks of the world, like the giant corporations that have tons, thousands of employees, it's hard to stand out. And you got to like really like make it specific. Versus if you're at like a startup with 10 people, then it's probably already known what you've already done. But that's an interesting concept.
And I will come back to one thing. I said knowledge is power earlier. Part of that knowledge is knowing how your company does it, right? I don't think that it's again. I keep on bringing it back to resumes, but one of the lessons you learn is you don't just go out and like literally just send the same resume to everybody.
Right.
You tailor it because you want to make sure that you're speaking to the job that you're applying for.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think with this, it's like, hey, you can take these bits of knowledge, but at the end of the day, the other part of the work is you having a solid understanding of how your company does it. I will say that there are companies that I've worked at that, literally you're writing almost like a book on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough, but it's because you do have to like, compete with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, Gabe, like with startups, yeah, it's a smaller pot, but I still think that it is important, even if it's shorter.
Yeah.
Always have that, the specific achievement or the strength, the embodiment of that strength specifically, and then ultimately the impact. Like I think it's going to be good.
So number 2, all roads lead to impact.
Yep.
Let's do it. Number 3. Let's get into
Number
it.
3. I have no other way to say this, but this is a team sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to doing this review season, it's not just going to be you reviewing yourself. It's going to be a couple other things. It's going to be you asking other people to review you in your peer reviews. I know a lot of companies do this.
Yep.
And then you're also going to be reviewing other people.
Yeah.
So I really think that the companies that do this right really have people who take all that seriously, right?
Yeah.
Not just their own. Yes, I want to put extra focus on that, but I also realize that because of my perspective, I might have been able to work with you on a project, Gabe, and I want to say, hey, I want to make sure I capture that.
Yeah.
So the way that I believe that we do that, let's go ahead and just look at the different elements, right? If I'm asking people to review me,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be very purposeful about those people that I'm asking.
Yeah.
If I want to find somebody who, hey, they had specific knowledge about how I work with them on a project.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that in that project, I exhibited stuff that was in line with the values of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that we were able to use this project to achieve goals. Right. So you want to be very purposeful, about finding people that you really want to reach out to who are going to have that amazing opinion of your work and that perspective that you might not be able to get elsewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like, hey, you know what? I think they think that I'm a nice guy, person.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, I want to find somebody who has like really innate knowledge. Now, the other thing is people are going to be asking you for this as well.
Yeah.
They're going to be asking you, and I think that it is a very serious responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when managers look at that 360 feedback, and again, this is pending your company does this,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to take that into consideration. Typically, when I've seen reviews in the past, it will be a strength, and it'll be something where there are quotes from my peers that actually like speak to that strength.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, that really is what drives it home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I don't have those quotes, then it's going to be harder for my manager to see that strength in me outside of what they do.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's not only serious for you to select the right people and also help prepare them, maybe let them know, hey, would really love to hear your thoughts on how I did on this project.
Yeah.
And even if you want to talk with them beforehand, right? One thing I've always done is before I send people feedback, I say, hey, before I submit this, I want you to review this and see what you think,
Yeah.
right? Do you think this accurately captures what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Similarly, when you're doing it for other people, I think there is no better value that you could bring than to really take it as seriously, if not more seriously, than you do for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because literally you can be the help that person needs to be able to, have that embodiment really stand out. So I think that that's good. And then lastly, this one's always interesting, but you can and probably will be called on to review your manager.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I don't think this is something where it's like, oh, make sure you only write good things.
Yeah.
I think it's like, hey, feedback is how you grow. It's how
Yeah.
we grow. It's how we all grow. So I really think it's on you to really just, make sure that you take those things into consideration. Don't just have it be, Erik's my manager, he's awesome, he's great. No, be like, hey, one area that I think Erik could have greater impact in is he can, maybe spend more time on, one-to-ones that talk about stuff other than work. Right. So I think that there's opportunities to really do all of that and, just really make sure that you're thoughtful in that. I'm a firm believer in what you put out into the world is what you get back. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is especially key here. And I also think that, if your manager can see, sorry, I'm getting long-winded, but if your manager can see that you apply that same thoughtfulness to the reviews you do for others as you do for yourself, I think that shows them, they are they see themselves as something much larger than themselves,
Yeah.
which I don't know about other managers, but if I see that, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's almost like, do you lead that conversation and being like, hey, like you did a great job. If you need some feedback, let me know and I can do that. Like, is that like a conversation that you kind of initiate in those moments? Like, what do you think is like, I guess, the best practice in that, I guess, realm?
Great question. So I typically think this is driven by the person who's soliciting the feedback,
Yeah.
right? And the reason I say that is because when you see that in these cycles, they'll say, hey, select or nominate 2 or 3 people that you want to speak
Yep.
on your behalf. So I think the work that you do there is just really preparing them, right? And then offering, if you've done that with them, it's like, hey, if I can provide any feedback for you, or if you want to leverage me as a person providing this, and more than happy to do so. But again, super important responsibility to not just do it, but to do it well. Now, the other part of this is you also have to protect yourself, right? And here's what I mean by that. If you have 15 people reaching out to you saying like, hey, like, I really think that you can provide great feedback, sure, that's awesome. But if you take on all that, you're also going to burn yourself out on feedback. You're going to get all that. And so I would say just be really careful and selective too.
Yeah.
Say, who are the people where I believe I could have the most impactful insight on the work that they did, projects, embodiments of this, I think that's just something else to focus on.
I mean, just me being the person that's doing the reviews, I always have a moment where like I see that and I just keep it on red. I'm like, I'm gonna get to that. But if there's like so many of them, I'm not gonna get to all of them. So I want to be thoughtful. I want to like go into that with like a fresh mind, give you like good stuff. But if it's like 15 of them, that makes sense.
Yep.
So if we're to, all right, knock it down, 3 steps. So first one is understand the mission and the goals of your company.
Yep. Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Number 2, it's all roads lead to impact.
Yep.
So write down your accomplishments, but make sure they tie back to the impact of number 1. Number 3, you just talked about it. Be a team player. Be a team player. Team feedback, 360, making sure you're doing that. So I think that's a great way to wrap this conversation up. Now, I want to go into some of the Q&A now. We had a lot of interesting stuff.
Oh, wow.
It got real spicy. Yeah, so we could probably just talk through some of those questions that we had.
All right, so what if they say economy making budget tight for pay?
Yes. The economy, I'm going to just repeat that. So the economy is making budget tight for pay increases.
Yeah.
What do we do
Man,
there?
that is a tough one. So, at the end of the day, even though you could write and do a bunch of great work and stuff that you believe would merit performance increase or promotion, at the end of the day, there are requirements that come down from the company that are in place, right? Now, typically, and this is kind of potentially an inside loop, maybe people have heard this before, but whenever I look at promotion specifically, there needs to be 2 things that could happen. One, they need to have had sustained performance at the next level for a select period of time. Different companies will have different periods. Some people will say 2 halves, some people will say 2 quarters. But typically, if you're going to be evaluated for a performance or a promotion, rather, you need to have been operating at that level. The second is the big one, which is, well, I think they're both big, but second is there a need for that role to be promoted into right now? So why do I say that? It's not a direct answer to this question, but there is a lot of this that is external, right? To like, their ability to do this. Now, if it's come down to it, typically what you will see is teams will receive budget to essentially be able to promote into this, or they'll have like, performance-based raises and all that type of stuff. So at the end of the day, it is very much quite possible, especially in today's market, unfortunately, where, there may be that response that you get.
Yeah.
But I do think that you still can do the best that you can to really kind of like advocate. And again, I think the best advocacy is how did you have impact on the workflows?
Yeah.
How did you have impact, or sorry, not the workflows, the goals. How did you have an impact on growth of whatever it is your team was trying to do?
Yeah.
And, I think it's fair to have that conversation. It's like, hey, if you want to have that conversation and say like, hey, and this is a whole other topic that we can go into detail on. But advocate for yourself. Say that this is what I feel like I brought to the table.
Yeah.
I believe that I exceeded goals. I believe that I stood above and beyond what you were looking for.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk about potential for pay increase.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's fault if you do it correctly. If you come in and you say, well, it's not even proven that I achieved what they were looking for, and I achieved a high rate. I haven't even achieved a high rating, and you come guns blazing saying like, "Hey, I think I deserve this."
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be as effective as if you had the opportunity to do that. But again, making sure that you and your manager are on the same page about what impact means.
Yeah.
Impact is so critical to all this. So again, to really just bring it back, I think that Yeah, I mean, there are very real external factors that are going to be controlling a lot of what you see. But I always believe in, hey, what is it that I can control? And how do I maximize on what I can control?
Yeah.
And again, I think that is a lot of just, hey, really focus your work on stuff that drives value and impact for your team and the company.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody can refute that if you come to it and show in a really thoughtful way that you did that.
Yeah.
So,
And this is just like my optimism speaking, but like, in a situation like that, like being prepared and knowing like and continuing to have that conversation with your manager of like, is this role even an opportunity for me down the line? Like, let's be honest, and then have that candid conversation. But ultimately, if you're continuing to be diligent in your work, and showing that, I do believe if something does open up and people notice the work that you're consistently doing, something that was more meant for you will be there. So,
and I would say you brought up a great point. If any of you are managers out there, I'm sure some of you are. Yeah. There is no better. There's no better task that you can take on than being an advocate for your team, right? And I think that if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want to grow," your best answer is to, even if they're not doing great, find ways for them where they could have greater impact in areas where you think that they need to have greater impact.
That's big.
And literally take every opportunity to connect with them on that.
Yeah.
Don't let it be something where it's like, okay, after last review, we talk about it for 2 weeks and it just gets thrown into the ether, right? You want to make sure that it's like a consistent thing. I know for my people, I always try to say, okay, not only are we trying to find opportunities for you to have that greater impact, or if you want to be more specific, operating in that next level, but it's also making sure that you spend time consistently focusing on that. You never, and this is again is a whole nother talk we could do, but you never as a manager want it to just be, how you doing? Great. Okay, cool. 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 20 minutes back. No, you want it to be, hey, let's talk about these 3 things. I prepared an agenda prior to the meeting. I want it to be equal parts status check if you need to do that, or like bring me problems that you can't resolve. And I want it to be equal parts. Let's talk about your career, or you kind of like alternate.
Yeah.
One meeting is about those status checks and problems that you're having in your job. The other one is like, okay, let's see where you are with regards to these goals. So again, shout out to all the managers, but for the non-managers, I think it's also on you to try to, if you feel up for it, hold your manager accountable. And you drive that conversation. There is, again, very important lesson that I learned. You own your own career. Your manager does not own your career. You own your own career.
Yep,
you are in charge of your own career.
Yeah,
so at the end of the day, like, hey, you can't expect them to just magically take this on. You have to be the one pushing for it, and I think that's a huge part of all of this.
That's big. Now, I know there was a question in there, and Kyle, you can pull it up around managers or having poor advocacy.
Yeah.
Do you have the right one?
So how do you navigate not having a supportive manager or not being on the right project?
How do you navigate not having a supportive manager or not being on the right project? So it's kind of like now you're missing that piece to the puzzle.
Great question. I think, again, the biggest belief that you have to take on and the mindset that you have to have is you are in charge of your own career. Put more specifically, you own your own career, right? Yeah. You are the owner for that. Yes, the actions of a manager can potentially help or not help.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, if I'm thinking of someone who has a owner mindset of their career, if I don't feel like I'm getting what I'm getting from my manager, I'm finding a constructive way to go to them and say, hey, you know what? I would love to actually start talking with you about career development and growth. Here are some of the goals that I have. Would love to hear your thoughts, and do you think that this is something that we can continue to talk about? If you feel like you are the other side of this, where it's like, hey, I'm not getting goals, or I'm not having the opportunity to work on things that I believe are mission critical, then I think you also need to find a way to talk about that. Again, it's not kicking down their door and saying what's going on. No, it's more like, hey, you know what? I really have enjoyed getting to work here. I enjoy the mission of what's happening and how our team gets to contribute to that. Would love to talk with you about how can my work really contribute to that as well.
Yeah.
How do you see there being inroads from what I do to this here? So again, advocating for yourself in a way that's constructive to the relationship, but also making sure that you ask the questions that need to be asked, right? I think that's huge.
That's good.
Yep.
Quick time check, Kyle. How are we doing?
Good. It is 10:30.
Oh, perfect. Doing great. All right. Let's go through the rest of the questions real quick.
All right.
Quick shot fire.
What's the response to we can speak more in our next fiscal year when we have a budget?
New budgets. The question is, we can speak next year when we have a new budget in the next fiscal year. I've changed the wording around, but that's essentially the question.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this really speaks to that self-advocacy, making sure you're clear with your manager about your desires and stuff like that in a way that's constructive to relationship and everything like that. Again, it can be a reality that hey, we just don't have the budget to do this. But again, the best thing that you could do is put yourself in a position of like, hey, you know what, I feel like I'm worthy of this, right? And make sure that you have different points that you can utilize. It's like, hey, I helped us achieve this number that we had for a sales quota. I participated in this sprint and hit, trying Kyle's world here, but like I participated in a sprint and, was able to hit these 3 dates for what I did with high quality code that resulted in X, Y, Z. And then also like, again, the mission and values. It's like, hey, I exhibited this mission and value while doing it. Again, I think the other part of being an advocate for yourself and the manager and person who's being managed relationship is driving the consistent check-in if you feel like you're not getting that from the other end, right? And the best way, and I know it sounds so easy, but start a doc that you have for the one-to-ones that you have with your manager. Literally hold them to that. Put it in the calendar invite. Like create a Google Doc, put it in the calendar invite, but make sure that you're also staying on top of it. It could get so easy to get to that point where you get the 10-minute meeting reminder and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't put anything in there. Stay on top of it. Have those things that you talk about. So when it comes time for your manager to consider something where it's like, hey, you know what, pay raise, pay increase. I'm going to look at the people. I mean, we didn't get to really talk too much about this, but a lot of this is controlled by rating systems that exist within the company, right? So what I mean by that is, typically in a lot of these reviews, at the end of it, you're getting something like a meets expectations, a exceeds expectations, a greatly exceeds expectations, or on the other side, does not meet expectations. And I think that, with those, a lot of that really comes, or, when it comes to evaluating pay increases, merit-based increases, and equity compensation, even promotions, a lot of that is going to be based on that rating. So I think that, again, this goes back to the knowledge is power part, right? If you have a solid knowledge about what the expectations are for your role, specifically as they pertain to achieving the goals and, really just what's in your job description, you can really have a better position for, not dictating, but having a presence in that conversation that you have with your manager.
Interesting. No, funny enough, my current manager, we have a running spreadsheet, and it's basically like month to month, we'll have a monthly check-in on career goals, and I make sure the documents link, copy, whatever, everything that I possibly can think of that I did do pertaining to the goals of the company of what I was aiming to achieve. And that's been so helpful. Like, it's so easy to just point back to when the performance reviews come around, which I got that email, like I told you, like maybe 4 or 5 days ago. It's all there. All I got to do is copy, paste, link, hyperlink, bullet, and it's there. So super helpful. Definitely document all the stuff that you're doing. Super helpful. What you got, Kyle?
Okay. So how do you navigate feeling afraid to not sound like a team player for asking for a raise?
So the question, how to navigate feeling like you're not a team player for asking for a raise. So you talked a lot about team players, but sometimes you feel, and I think I personally feel this too, where it's like, hey, like I want to ask for money, but like I know the business is trying to grow, so am I selfish for asking more money? So kind of like almost on the other side of it is like you're being too much of a team player. Is that a thing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a really hard, good, and tough question. So props to whoever asked this. I think that I really think that if done correctly and done from a defensible position, I don't really think you could be wrong in asking for a raise. I think that, again, let's talk about what defensible means. Let's talk about, again, being that team player. I firmly believe that if you are in a place where you can say, you know what, I could definitively, there we go, look at what I've done, look at my ability to achieve goals, look at my ability to grow the team or help move the team towards goals, whether as a manager or as an IC. If you've had that kind of impact on the team, the business, and the company, then I think it is within your, I would say within your, what am I trying to say? Within your rights, so to speak, to really go in there and potentially ask for it. Now, the thing to focus on is it's not, it's all about the delivery, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. So thankfully, I've never really had, as a manager, anybody who did it like what I could perceive as like a less impactful way, right? I think less impactful is, baseless. You kind of just come in there and say, I want more money. I think a better way is to say, you know what, if I'm talking to my manager, let's say her name's Christina. Christina, just want to say thank you for the opportunities you've afforded me to do well here. Kind of sounds like I'm leaving speech, but it's not. But I appreciate the opportunities you afforded me. It's been great to be able to work on high impact projects and really do all this. I feel like I've been able to really drive this team forward by achieving the goals. And as such, one thing I just want to let you know is I'm really focused on growth. And one of those areas is also looking at my own personal growth in areas like, responsibility, the scope of what I do, and also potentially, even in my pay or, my compensation. And as such, I would love to enter into a conversation with you where we have the opportunity to discuss what a potential pay increase could look like.
Yeah.
And, would love to hear your thoughts on it. I think great conversations are ones where you put your mind out there and then where you create space for them to share theirs, right?
Yep.
Now, you may get feedback from them, like we talked about earlier, where it's like, hey, like we just aren't in a position to do so right now. And, sometimes that will be because the company is just not in a position.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is just be ready to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, it's like, well, tell me more about, some of the goals you helped achieve and why you want to do this.
Yeah.
And that's not, I think most good managers, they're not doing it out of a position of being sinister. They're going to have to go to their manager and they're going to have to go to their finance team all the way up to like the CFO potentially and say, okay, like, how do we get the money to do this?
Yeah.
Right. So if a manager asks you questions about it, I wouldn't just see it as like, oh, they're like interrogating me, unless it feels like an interrogation.
Or they're like invalidating that I am doing this work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, again, that's where it's like key to all Lincoln's impact, right? If you could definitively say like, hey, I drove this forward, and even more so, if I receive positive feedback from a manager in writing and also have performance reviews that substantiate that, then like, I mean, you really can't lose, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's all about just owning your career,
Yeah.
right? Own that relationship with your manager. Make sure that your performance is really readily available. And again, this is just a shameless plug for me, but I firmly believe that when you have leaders who are, really showing that their success was through their team as opposed to just by themselves, I think that's all. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that whenever I try to talk about things, like I lead a team right now, and I try to say, you know what, the team achieved this. Yes, I was the leader, but we achieved this as a team, and we worked through together.
Yeah.
Because I think, when everybody wins, we all win.
Yeah.
Right? So I think
What a
that's
great
good.
leader. What a great leader.
Last question. Manager said, let's wait for the right time.
Whew. Man.
Repeating the question, the manager has said, let's wait for the right time to get a promotion or a raise.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a tough one. I think that that's a very general statement.
Yeah.
And I think that, if that was me, I would probably say, cool, let's just really define like, hey, what, comprises a right time like that. Again, in a way that's constructive, doesn't seem like it's, an inquisition or an interrogation.
Yeah.
But you're saying like, hey, I love that. Would love to figure out what that is with you. Is this something that is going to be me stepping into something, maybe stepping into that next level before that can get recognized, which is completely fair and like standard. Is it that, maybe like, hey, there's no manager positions open now, but, maybe there will be soon. Maybe again, going to the earlier questions, it's not, there's no pay increase available right now, but we will be getting that. I think it's fair for you as owner of your career and your success. That's the other part. It's not just you owning your career, it's owning your success. To really just, say like, hey, like, I would love to really work on what that looks like with you so that when that time comes and we can do this and we can, this is up for evaluation, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, I'm dropping this all on you at the last minute. Again, owning your success is consistent. It's follow through.
Yeah.
It's being transparent, but being constructive in the relationship and being able to navigate just, hey, this is what I've done to achieve goals. This is how I've done it with mission and values and so on and so forth.
I mean, honestly, everything that I'm hearing today is like a lot of things are out of your control. Like you can't control a bad manager. You can't control having somebody who's not advocating for you or putting you in the right projects. What you can control is, I guess, your diligence to continue to push forward the agenda of making sure that you're being given what you're due.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, like managers aren't always going to be good.
Yeah.
I think we've all probably experienced a pretty bad manager or someone who's just not there or visible. So it's just a matter of changing that perspective of how you can kind of take ownership of those specific situations.
And I will say one thing, Gabe, and this is kind of a controversial topic sometimes, but I had managers in the past who told me something. They said, okay, if you feel like you have feedback for me, give it to me. If you feel like you can't go to me with that feedback, go to my manager. If you feel like you can't give it to them, go to their manager.
Yeah.
Right. I firmly believe like, you should start with your manager unless you believe that there is a scenario or situation that involves like, your safety, your, career safety or physical safety, your safety, your, reputation, anything like that. You should never be in fear of that being impacted if you're being honest and transparent and clear. But I do feel like if you ever have a manager where you feel like you can't go to them, then I do feel like, hey, maybe you go to their manager and so on and so forth. But I firmly believe that the first conversation you should feel empowered to have if you have a great manager is to talk with that manager directly as well.
And then I think even at some point it's a conversation to say if your team's just not there for you, then do you just start looking elsewhere? Look for another job, look for another opportunity, because I think, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that we can do, but then some of it's out of our control. It feels like,
but and again, like, excellent point. If you feel like, I've done the work, I've achieved the goals that they've been put out to all my understanding. I've received positive feedback, and I've pushed and I've tried to get this here, but I feel like I'm not being recognized for what it is that I do. For some people, the answer to that question is to go ahead and seek elsewhere. Go try to find some place where they feel like they can be recognized. And again, sometimes if a company can't do it, then maybe it is time to potentially look at another company and say, like, hey, maybe they can recognize me in a way that they want to. Again, you have to think about the opportunity cost of that. You have to start at a new company. You have to start over. You have to build a relationship, build a reputation with your team. But I've actually, having moved so many times in my career, I see that there's growth opportunities in that. So I really just think, like, really before you jump, really know, like, what's down there, right? Before you jump and make a decision, take time, step back. It can be very intimidating to have that conversation with your manager. B, after you get out of it, if you feel like you haven't gotten what you believe was entitled to you, you may be angry, upset, you may be sad, you may be frustrated. Take time to take a step back and say, okay, let me just think about this over the night. Consider all the factors and then make a decision based on that. If your decision is leading you elsewhere, start finding out ways to do that, but do so in a way that never burns bridges. The valley is so much larger, the valley, so to speak. I mean, the valley isn't even the valley anymore. It's now the globe. It's so much larger than what it was, but I'll tell you, it is still so small.
It's crazy. I find myself to, like, run into people that I've worked with, been like, an engagement manager for, I've consulted for during work. They're always going to come back around in some way, shape, or form. It's a really small world now that you actually think about it. Kyle's the most social person that I know, so he knows everybody around here. But
kind of.
This room here knows a lot of people. But no, I think that's insightful stuff. At the end of the day, like, I think the times that we're in are asking for, what do we do next? Like, there's just a lot of, like, what do we do? I'm kind of doing my best to, like, kind of hold down the fort, understand what I can do in my company, because, I don't know, like, going to a new company doesn't sound appealing, especially when things are a little shaky, because, one false move, and now you're like the first piece that was like, this guy's new here. So that's all I'm always worried about. So I just kind of think about how to stay put and keep it chill. But any final parting words, Erik, for the people here? We're gonna just go ahead and leave this as, like, let's give us a one-liner, the one thing you want everybody to, like, walk away with from this conversation.
I mean, I keep going back to, you own your own success, right? Nobody's going to do this for you. I think that's one of the biggest things I would have as a mindset. That's not a defeatist mindset. That is a charge forward mindset to really make sure that you know that you are your biggest advocate. You will find people who will advocate for you. You will find great managers, but you have to put a lot into those relationships to make sure that it is a slam dunk, when it comes time for those important questions and conversations to be asked. So, super excited to have had the opportunity to talk with you all. Again, thanks for the opportunity, Gabe and Kyle. OTT, you're going to do some amazing things, and just hope love getting to kind of see what you all are doing. So
thank you, Erik. Thank you for being a part of this masterclass workshop on performance reviews. If anybody out there needs any career coaching advice, Erik is a resource. Reach out to him. He has his services, as well as just being a good ear altogether. So reach out to us. Hopefully this was valuable to you all, and we'll talk soon. Signing out.
And
go ahead.
Good job, man.
great job.
Good job.